Astri are very inspirational to me. I got to eat dinner with them last night, and I am just really amazed by how much we shared in terms of our views on gender and time and a lot of things, and it makes me want to know them in the future. So welcome, Astri and Liz.
Thank you. First of all, that we get to share this sort of stage with all these fantastic people today. It's been amazing. I'm Astri.
And I'm Liz.
And, here it is. And we are here today to tell you that the very structure of the way we build our lives is changing. That for you, for us, for every single member of the creative economy, the end of an era has come. For the next 18 minutes, we are going to argue that the way we build our lives is changing from the shape of a ladder to that of a lattice. And we're also going to try to convince you that you should plan your future lives according to this new reality. So let's start with something called the corporate ladder. I'm sure you've all heard about it, right? Corporate ladder is the model for a life with a linear trajectory. On a ladder, you can really only go in two directions, right? You can climb up, or you can go down being sort of falling down. So in a way, the ladder is really the epitome of inflexibility, of the kind of working culture that rewards a 40-year career within one company with a gold watch and a sweet retirement package.
But we don't want to sound flippant. The stability and the benefits that come with a 40-year career in one company are nothing to really joke about, right? But unfortunately, that model of work is just not a reality for a lot of people. It's really an endangered species. As I'm sure you've heard, our generation switches jobs all the time, about as often as we change our shoes. And really, companies aren't offering lifetime employment anymore, so for better or worse.
So why is the ladder model an endangered species? Partly because our competitive globalized world demands flexibility. Companies need to be able to hire X and Y person when they need X and Y person, switch them out for Z dude when they don't, okay? Sad for X and Y, but okay. The other reason it's an endangered species is because it's actually only set up to suit a particular kind of worker, something called the ideal worker, you may have heard of. The ideal worker is somebody who can work year-round, overtime at the drop of a hat, who can show up to a specific place at a specific time, and basically has very few responsibilities outside of work.
And guess what? That ideal worker is a man, and who probably has a stay-at-home wife. And I know that might sound a bit ridiculous, but it's true. If you look at the corporate ladder, it's really not set up for people to deal with personal and family responsibilities. Things like taking care of a sick parent, or getting the kids to school, or having kids for that matter. Would it surprise you if I told you that the U.S. is one of only 4 countries in the world that doesn't offer paid parental leave? The other countries are Lesotho, Swaziland, and Papua New Guinea. So it's really exceptional. In the U.S. we have something called the Family and Medical Leave Act, which says that employers have to offer employees 12 weeks of unpaid vacation leave to have kids, which if you have a company and fewer than 50 employees, you're exempt, and more importantly, who can afford to take unpaid leave from their work? To give you some perspective, in Sweden, where Astri is from, they grant workers 18 months of paid parental leave to be split between parents any way that they see fit, with 2 months reserved for the father. They also offer unlimited sick leave. And I know that Swedish policies seem exceptional, but that's really because our policies are so exceptionally bad.
But it doesn't end there, it gets worse. In the US, you don't actually guarantee any paid vacation or any paid sick leave. Now, for perspective again, out of the 20 top economies in the world, 18 provide their workers with at least 30 days. America, none. Crazy. So if you look at this work culture that doesn't let you be sick, let you have kids, or take care of those sick kids, what can you say? That it's basically tailored to the man from the 1950s, Don Draper, who doesn't really exist anymore, except for on the screen. So does this sound outdated? Because it really is. Out of the American families, 70% have 2 adults in the workforce today. And even though women, sorry ladies in here, do 2/3 of the domestic work still, the fact is that the role of being a father and a man is definitely changing. And men have to do a lot more time in terms of putting in caring and cooking and all that stuff than, say, our grandfathers or even our father's generations. So the truth is that the ideal worker really doesn't exist very much anymore. The average American worker, man or woman, has a lot of other responsibilities to juggle alongside the job.
All right, so at this point you might be thinking, where are they going with this? And what does this have to do with creating an impact or a dialogue? But this is it. This is our grand plan, our grand strategy. We take every opportunity that we're given to talk about what we really care about, which is the very sad state of work and family policy in the US. We especially love large captive audiences like you guys, but we'll take anybody, as our poor friends will attest to. And our journey as these self-proclaimed work-life balance advocates started here at Middlebury during our senior year of college, and everyone was obsessed with the future. That's all we could talk about. So we asked our girlfriends, just one conversation. So what do you think you're going to do when you have kids? And we were really surprised by the answer because almost all of them said that they planned on taking a few years off of work to raise their kids, not really because they wanted to quit their job, because they couldn't think of another way to make it work. And we asked our guy friends what they were going to do, and they produced really blank stares. And think about it. What would you do? And so we knew that they'd never thought about it at all. And everybody kind of just assumed that it was going to work out. And, it is our way. It's hard to think about. But
So this seemed really unplanned, coming from super planning mid-kids like we were, and I am sure you all are. So Liz and I decided to investigate. We wanted to find out what people of our generation, so-called Generation Y, really think about the issues of combining professional and personal life. We also wanted to find out what the real policies were that were in place, because we didn't know either. What were the company policies or the national policies? So that's when Liz and I started the Lattice Group, a nonprofit organization aimed at researching and spreading dialogue about work-life issues from a specifically Gen Y perspective.
So our graduation came and went, and to the horror of our parents, we decided not to get jobs. And this was 2007, so this was pre-Lehman Brothers, so there were actually jobs to be had. But instead, we kind of racked our brains trying to think of a way to get young people to start thinking about work and family life at an earlier age when they can actually do something about it. And there's really nothing less sexy or hip than trying to get 20-somethings like you guys to think about, future family things. Nobody wants to think about that. We all want to think about our careers.
Especially 20-something guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we really needed a plan, and we needed financial backing before our parents disowned us. And I wish I could tell you that we came up with this grand plan, we stuck to it, but really we kind of fumbled into things. I started with this, insisting we do this elaborate 30-page formal proposal, and after we finished it, we never looked at it again.
So meanwhile, while Liz was sort of writing this proposal, and Maggie, I became a stalker, literally. I tracked down this Middlebury alum and trustee who I heard might be interested in our kind of project, loosely, and I started calling her, and leaving messages all the time. Getting borderline. And finally, this actually ended up resulting in a 10-minute meeting in a New York City taxi cab as she is shuttling between appointments, much more important than ours. But boom, that's where most of our funding came from. So you never know. So we took this funding and we traveled to 5 countries, and we interviewed students, young professionals, and people already established in their field about work-life balance issues.
Right, so in addition to this really fun real-world research that we got to do, we had our virtual world. So we had a website and a blog, and we put up videos and resources, all this stuff for free because we're Gen Y and that's what we do. We have free websites. The difficult part of having a website as your main dialogue strategy is that it's really hard to track the impact that you're having. So you can see how many people actually come to your website, but you never know what they're getting out of your website. The great thing about a website, though, and which is why we'd encourage you to have one if you want to, is that it starts to take on this life of its own. We started getting contacted by all these fascinating people in the work-life world. We realized it was actually a really small group of people who were fighting for this. We started to feel like we were part of this movement, that we could actually make an impact one day. So I know that I don't need to tell the people in this room this, really, but you should never underestimate the power of the internet and your own power to do that.
As we've been learning today also. So what we found when we traveled and picked the brains of over 100 young people in these 5 countries is that clear patterns were emerging. So Gen Yers really resent the idea of FaceTime at an office just for FaceTime's sake. They crave and demand flexibility in terms of geography and in terms of time. And Gen Y women and men said they wanted to have lifelong, rewarding careers, but also if they wanted children, they wanted to take time off. They expressed this, but were scared shitless, for how they were going to do it. They didn't know how, and they looked just despondent, just depressed.
It was sad, but they had a reason to worry because unfortunately our world is still this ladder world. People still expect an ideal worker to show up to work. That's most of the employers out there still want that. Consider this, there's a study that was published in the New York Times that surveyed Harvard College alumni 15 years after they graduated, and they wanted to get the average financial penalty for taking 1.5 years off of work. And they estimated that for people in medicine, the average penalty for a doctor who quit work for 1.5 years was 16%, and that was actually the best of all the interviews. So the people in here who are doing pre-med, you should keep that up. For people who are doing finance and consulting, the financial penalty was 41%. So that's for 1.5 years, which is certainly not the 2 or 3 that our ambitious, motivated girlfriends were talking about.
Are we freaking you out? Because we were really freaked out about this. We are, still. We read everything you can read, and we still don't have a cut and dry answer for you, unfortunately. But what Liz and I have found is the best antidote to the inflexible ladder culture is to push for and embrace an entirely different kind of culture, what we like to call a lattice lifestyle. So we talked in the beginning about what a corporate ladder looks like and how it's very linear and inflexible. Well, lattice, and thankfully the previous presentation we saw an image of one, looks like a web, more like it, And so it means that you can move in different directions on a lattice. It's not just up and down, you can go like diagonally and faces. And so a lattice is really the embodiment of a life and career track that is characterized by flexibility. And ultimately, it's a model that's better suited for the realities of modern workers.
And we have to be honest that it's going to take very serious changes to the way that we live our lives and think about work and building a career for this to really be possible for a lot of people. There are people out there who are making it work, and in the interest of time, I'm going to direct you to our website, and maybe you can look and see how some people are making it work. But one really important thing about making a lattice lifestyle work is realizing that you're going to have to readjust your expectations. So Sierra talked a little bit about burnout. You have to know that if you want to be the CEO of Coca-Cola by the time you're 35, that's just not going to happen if you want to live kind of a lattice lifestyle. So you can just stop listening to those of you who want that. And we understand that somebody has to be the CEO of Coca-Cola. And for now, that person is probably going to be a man, stay-at-home wife, and 97% of Fortune 500 CEOs are men. And of the women CEOs out there, only about 30% have kids.
So that sucks, pretty much. It doesn't have to be that way in the future. Actually, other societies in Europe, especially in the Scandinavian countries, whole society is getting together to make this more possible by, for example, implementing national policies of generous leaves. And what happens then in return is that companies need to be competitive, and so they match with their own internal policies. And the biggest change is actually the social expectations that are changing. So today, 80% of new fathers in Sweden take several months of paternity leave, which is a huge change. And we remember interviewing this super sort of macho venture capitalist dude in Stockholm, and he was telling us about his head honcho boss, equally sort of as described him, hardcore guy, and he was on paternity leave and had been for 6 months. And I sort of raised my eyebrows and I was like, whoa, is that frowned upon, or is that, And he just looked at me like, what? No. Like, oh, imagine that, future finance guys in here.
And so what Astri's talking about is that whole industries can change and whole cultures can change. In the US, I think, unfortunately, we're still scrambling and we're still trying to make it work as individuals. So it's going to take a lot. It's going to take our society to give all of us the basic building blocks of a lattice lifestyle, which from what we have gathered so far is going to be paid parental leave and minimum, paid parental leave, paid sick leave and vacation days, affordable public childcare, and flexibility in the workplace. But until we get to that point, people are going to have to make things work for themselves. And there is no... Okay. So there is no blueprint, but we are going to offer you a few more words of advice.
Number 1, The most important thing that you can do is educate yourself about the realities of the workplace and about the particular career or job that you're interested in pursuing. So you can do that already now. Look at people you admire. Don't just ask them the predictable questions like where they went to graduate school or how they got their first job. Ask them about the difficulties they have, the challenges. How did they succeed in creating a balance between their professional and personal lives, or did they fail? You may not love what you hear, but you'll learn. The second thing is really important. You have to figure out what matters to you personally. Is it being geographically mobile? Is it living lavishly? Be honest about it. For me personally, I've come to realize that it is more important for me to be able to control my time than to be able to order in with dinner, okay? So I've chosen a very risky and not very stable freelance lifestyle, but I know and embrace what those risks are, and I'm aware when I go into it. The third thing you guys have to think about, which is very sort of awkward, is that you have to talk to your partner or future partner about the tricky stuff already in the dating phase. You have to find out what kind of lifestyle does this person I'm with want? How are we going to get it? Who's doing what? Who's earning what? These are pretty awkward dating questions, you know? But I beg you to recall what probably your sex ed teacher told you some back in 8th grade. If you can't talk about it, don't do it. You can ask us afterwards about our varyingly successful and varyingly embarrassing encounters with this.
I'm going to try not to move. So we've spent, about 60 minutes really hating on the ladder, and down with ladder, down with FaceTime. But deep down, I hate to admit this, but I'm a ladder person. I was raised by my Russian immigrant parents to be a ladder person, and I suspect that a lot of you out there were raised to be ladder people. We were all whizzes on the get into college ladder. But at the very least, I've decided that I'm not going to be a naive ladder person. So this is lesson number 4, be prepared for a fight. I know that my career, that I'm thinking of doing is not very flexible, but I'm committed to being really honest with my employer, with asking for flexibility, and with supporting organizations that are fighting for work-family friendly legislation. So I know it's going to be an uphill battle, but having done this research, I know that things can change, that industries can change, and that you really have to ask.
To conclude, try to design your life as a lattice as opposed to a ladder. Fight like hell for flexibility. Be clear that you're on the same page with your partner early on, and pause in the rush to excel that you're all on, and ask yourself the really tough questions. What you really want in your lifestyle and how you're going to do it. And we know we always skip over them. We tend to because they're tough. If I want to leave you with something, is that articulating the question is the first important step to finding